Considerations for ELL Evaluation by Laurie Smith. Our origins play a large role in how all of us speak. Our dialects and use of language can differ greatly, even though we are all speaking the same language. Recently, my husband shared a story about being on the phone with someone from the West Coast here in the United States, and the man on the other line told my husband that he really liked my husband's accent. And of course, my husband, not realizing, um, asked what accent because he was unaware that he was speaking um, with any dialect or any differences as anyone else in the United States. So that's how unaware maybe we are sometimes about our language and how our community and family play into that development of speech. Um, Assessing students who speak with a difference in language or a dialect that is related to their culture. Um, I was surprised to learn in our text that the number of persons in the United States who speak languages other than the language at home exceeds 61 million. I thought that was quite a number, and I did not realize how large that was. So determining differences in language or a dialect can inform professionals about what kind of services, if any, are needed. Um, so I think it's important for a student who is not an English first speaker that special attention is needed to determine um, their competence with their home or first language. So, and I guess for students who speak with a dialect, it has to be determined if the student is actually using dialectual variations or if there is really a learning disability. The impact that assessment impact on assessment approaches in oral language. My professional opinion. Well, I did think about this quite a long time, and I did consult two speech pathologists, and was at the elementary level, and one was at the early childhood level, early learning level. And both were adamant about dialects being a very gray shade when it comes to assessments. So I have I have, in my professional opinion, I think that students first. They need to be assessed as individuals. I accept that it's difficult to score, possibly in a in a real, I don't know, in a real way um, across the board in determining a learning disability. And I understand that it's difficult to rate that 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 student if they are being assessed as an individual. However, I do believe that there are ways that we can assess that individual informally and get a lot of information. I think it's important that we take our time, maybe more so in determining that assessment and not jumping in too quickly to factor in that the scoring. So I really do believe that we need to look at their family, their past history, the environment. All of those things need to be taken into account to identify a disability um, versus a an oral language. Um, whether it's their first language or whether it's a dialect, we need to be able to identify the individual and the individual's family and environment first. So that's my professional opinion on that. I don't like that students are placed inside a box, um, and because it just doesn't work for every student. One way is not the only way. the intervention options, if available. Um, I do understand that in our district we have a program set up in one of our buildings for ELL students. There's specialized services to accommodate their needs. I remember having a student who had um, some he was hearing impaired, and we had a sign language teacher assigned to him. Um, so I just kind of listed that, interpreters, those services, speech services, the IEP, of course, is going to monitor and document strengths and weaknesses. And I think all of those things are very important. I also, again, emphasize the need for individual accommodations and those intensive small group times with strategies that incorporate specific learning tools for that student. Oh, over and under identified. Um, Again, this is where um, that interview I had with the speech pathologists come in. They believe that there was a lot of, again, a lot of gray area, that it's not it's not a it's not a cut and dry measurement for every single student, because um, those students, it's not a one size fits all. Um, and what happens is when we try to fit one size fits all, we end up over and under identifying students. So I watched the video that talked about first under identifying and then over identifying, and basically it's just they're the opposite of each other. And when we move too quickly, not realizing that it is a language barrier, and we move quickly into believing that it's a learning disability instead, then we tend to um, we tend to over identify that way. Whereas if we stepped back, took our time, and really got to know the student, develop that relationship with families, and really get to know whether we are seeing a language barrier or an actual learning disability. I think it would be clearer if we took our time and really built those relationships first before we start assessing or making any rash decisions on that. So, in checking with my notes, um, again, that's what that's what I have written, is that just taking our time, developing those relationships, and making sure that we are not moving too fast to identify those students. And since students do have, language learners sometimes do have the same characteristics as learning disability. Um, it is a very hard thing to determine sometimes. So we have to be very careful. So that's my presentation. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.